This is Stan J. Caterbone at 1250 Fremont Street, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, 17603. It's 8:30 a.m. on Saturday, December 26, 2020, the day after Christmas. I'm going to give an update to the state of affairs of my targeting. I'm going to start by tracing the targeting back to 1986 when I was building Financial Management Group. Now, it culminated in 1987 when I blew the whistle on ISC after the meeting of June 23, 1987, and after I was developing and building the first digital movie with Tony Bon Jovi and Power Station Studios. Now, at that time, before the meeting, I was also doing commercial lending, and we were bidding on lending people, developers, money from all over the country for projects of $3 to $100 million. So all that was at stake, and that's when Manheim Township Police virtually arrested me for stealing my own files out of my own office, confiscated my airplane illegally, and in September 2nd, 1987, the Manheim Township Police filed 5 felonies and 4 misdemeanors against me. And ISC at the time was going through a merger with Ferrani, a defense contractor in England. And in March 1988, after the merger was completed, all the charges were dismissed. So I'm tracing the targeting back to that time. Now, before that, of course, it can be traced back to MK Ultra, my father in the Navy, and his targeting in the 60s by the Lancaster City Police, and my targeting now by the Lancaster City Police. That's a common denominator, and it's hard to get away from the fact that my father was a victim of MK Ultra, the CIA mind control, as well as my brother Sammy with the LSD experiments in the Air Force. Now, this past year, 2020, really opened up the information regarding some of these programs, COINTELPRO, that are illegal, U.S.-sponsored mind control, the targeting using microwave weapons and things of that nature. There are several high-profile whistleblowers that came forward this year with illuminating information. Dr. Robert Duncan, the scientist who worked on these weapons, specific weapons that target me, with DARPA, the CIA, and a host of other people. Then there was CIA whistleblower Barbara Hartwell, who was CIA, and she ran the PSYOPs programs for the CIA. Not all of them, but some of them. She was a PSYOPs operative. Now, she came forward last year, I think in October of 2019. Then there's Karen Stewart, of course, who's been a whistleblower for the NSA. And now we've got a problem in it being people are trying to get Julian Assange and Edward Snowden and Reality Winner, other whistleblowers that are imprisoned. Snowden's not in prison, but he's in asylum in Russia. They're trying to get them pardoned now by Trump. And Trump's going to come out with more high-level pardons in the following weeks. Now, Julian Assange, his targeting, he's being tortured just the way I am, only he's in prison over in London. And the United States is trying to extradite him back here and charge him and commit him to prison for 175 years. So all this is culminating around me, especially with my complaints to the United Nations dating back to 2009. Now, the past month or so, the targeting against me has escalated. The break-ins, the vandalism, the thefts, the computer hacking, the stalking, and harassment, especially by 1252 Fremont, 1256, and 1242. It's all stepped up. It's all, as Dr. Robert Duncan would say, on steroids. So I'm giving this update today, December 26, 2020, Saturday, the day after Christmas. Now, of course, I've got litigation going on in several courts. I'm in the U.S. Supreme Court. My case against the Lancaster County Prison goes back to the U.S. Supreme Court Justices on January 8, 2020. Now, I filed 2021. I filed a motion for reconsideration when they denied my most recent petition to the United States Supreme Court. So, I'm in litigation in U.S. Supreme Court. I'm also in litigation in Second Circuit Court regarding another NSA case where I'm moving on the case. You can look at the docket. Then, of course, I still have a pending amicus down in Florida in Broward County for the Nicholas Cruz case. That doesn't count all my other cases that are still active and open, including Caterbone versus Duke Street in the Lancaster County Court of Common Pleas, case 0813373, with Judge Miller presiding. And that is where I file a lot of the exhibits. Now, regarding the technology using microwaves, satellites, whatever you want to call it, with synthetic telepathy and torture regarding pain and things like that, and moving hands and things like that, is so well documented today, and it's being broadcast by major news outlets. The problem is, the city of Lancaster and County of Lancaster want to continue this phony, fabricated mental illness rap that began in 1987. Now, as far as the fabricated stalking charges in 2017 and 2019, that I'm on probation for 15 years until I'm 77, which is the date, the age my father died, which is very convenient. I'm trying to do things to get those charges dismissed, which they need to be dismissed sooner or later. In and above itself, I need relief. I need financial relief in the courts. I need relief from the stalking, from the harassment, from the computer hacking. I'm in litigation. Every time people come in here and delete files or modify files, that's obstruction of justice. This has to stop. Anyway, I could go on for hours. It's now 8:39 a.m., Saturday, December 26, 2020. I'm in my basement home office, bedroom, bathroom, laundry room at 1250 Fremont Street, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, 17603. This is Stan J. Caterbone and the Advanced Media Group.
We're being investigated right now by the FBI and the Attorney General.
TikTok's a big local minority-owned corporation that was doing it with a tenant contract. It was associated with IFC. Who was in trouble, and they went under last spring, beginning of the summer, and there was a lot of criminal allegations made and substantiated.
And I was connected with that. They sent a board member into was started, okay, back when they were, back to their inception, you look at ISC's books, they didn't have any money. Well, the first thing ChemCon did was they went and got all that free money from the government. And you look and see where that money went. I bet you I know where it went.
This guy named James Karen, I think his name is G-E-U-R-I-N or G-U-E-R.
And I know that they were selling contracts back.
He runs ISC, and he also had his fingers pretty deeply in ChemCon. And
He's the one who started ChemCon. Garen's the one who started it.
Wasn't there some allegations about a tie with Woodtech?
You bet. They were tied. You better believe they were tied with Wet Tech. Same guys in Wet Tech were involved with ISC and ChemCon.
ISCs that traded over the counter?
ISC, London Exchange.
London Exchange.
International Signal Control.
I need 1,000 shares. I sold it when things started hitting it. Tough.
International Signal?
Yep. Now they just did a multi-billion-dollar merger with this company in London. They're probably thinking it's going to cover the track.
United ChemCon is a local corporation.
Yep.
But there's magnitude on that. As of this last 3 months.
But with $18 billion in liabilities.
What they did was they got fronted all that money, started the contracts, went bankrupt. Now the government's stuck for $18 million.
Yeah, they weren't paying employees. They weren't producing the product. They weren't paying their unemployment and everything else.
We would pay withholding taxes.
No?
And it turns out that Christian, who I've had a few dealings with, had an office that would be suiting of any AT&T executive or having such security.
Amazing.
It was these racquetball things. It was an office. 4 or 5 cars, houses.
Let me tell you something about Jim Christian now. I know right now, in this town viewpoint, I stole money, I'm insane, and I'm lunatic. I'll tell you, I will not condemn Jim Christian until he tells me to my face what happened.
Right.
I was framed and set up, and I know I was doing it in
Your experience.
I don't know if maybe Jim Christian doesn't have the money. Maybe Garen has it or somebody else. $18 million is a lot of money.
But you can't even flounder that.
And he is broke because he lives with one of my best friends, Mr. I mean, they don't have money. And I would think that if he took it, he'd have something.
Yeah.
Iraqi Scud missiles, crude, inaccurate, and for the most part, ineffective. But the Iraqi military was well on its way to developing a far more powerful and accurate ballistic missile, one that was intended to carry nuclear warheads. And federal investigators tell us that some of the necessary equipment being used in that program came from the United States.
If there were no license with these shipments, I am absolutely shocked to learn that that sort of activity was taking place.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Cowell.
Television and investigative journalism is something of an uneasy match. Television news thrives on immediacy. Thorough investigations take time. Television stories need pictures, video. Investigations attempt to uncover events which someone has tried to conceal. It's difficult to illustrate a cover-up, but try to be patient with us. What we're going to report tonight is part of an ongoing investigative effort by ABC News Nightline and the Financial Times of London. It is only one piece of what we believe to be a much larger fabric. But let's focus on what a number of sources, both inside and outside the U.S. government, have already confirmed for us. Remember these scenes? They were shot by an ABC News camera team in Baghdad on the night of January 16th, when U.S. aircraft began their bombing campaign against the Iraqi capital. That blizzard of anti-aircraft fire was directed in part by tracking system sold to the Iraqi government by a company in South Africa. The South Africans sold quite a number of militarily useful items to Iraq, including cluster bombs and fuses. Those sales were handled by a Chilean middleman. But South Africa also conveyed to Baghdad some key technology that Iraq was using in the development of its ballistic missile system. All of this, the radar tracking system, the cluster bomb technology, the ballistic missile components, were sold by South Africa to Iraq. But most of what they sold, the South Africans had purchased from a company here in the United States. Officers of the CIA knew about those sales from the United States to South Africa, knew what was going, knew how it was getting there. Even though such sales were and are against the law, the CIA did nothing to stop them. Nightline correspondent Jeff Greenfield has details of the story that was compiled by reporters from ABC News Nightline and the Financial Times.
When you talk about the American heartland, you're talking about a place like Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It's Amish country. It's small-town Main Street. It's Norman Rockwell covers of the Saturday Evening Post. Lancaster, Pennsylvania was also the home of International Signal Control, a homegrown business that was a major regional employer, and whose founder and chairman, James Garin, was a generous regional benefactor.
Garin was probably the greatest philanthropist in the decade of the 80s that Lancaster has ever known.
There was something unknowable about the nature of the business, but it was sort of thought to be okay, that's government stuff, it's somehow it's okay.
What ISC did was to make or supply military hardware and components, everything from cluster bombs to state-of-the-art electronic gear to blueprints, so their customers could build bomb factories of their own. But it's not what ISC made or supplied that has made it the target of federal prosecutors for the last 2 years. It's where ISC's equipment and technology and know-how wound up, and how it got there. An ABC Nightline Financial Times investigation has unraveled a startling story with 3 key elements. First, that highly sophisticated technology flowed from ISC to South Africa, including technology critical to long-range missile development, missiles capable of delivering nuclear weapons. Second, this technology went from the United States to South Africa in clear violation of the law. Third, these shipments went on for years with the full knowledge of Central Intelligence Agency officials. What's more, federal investigators say they have good reason to believe that some of this technology, including ballistic missile technology, shipped illegally from ISC to South Africa, was in turn sold to Iraq, where it wound up as part of Saddam Hussein's military machine that the U.S. fought against in the Gulf War.
If these reports are true, and I take it there's a great deal of evidence to suggest that they are, then we have a renegade operation on our hands for whom the rule of law means nothing, for which the elected representatives apparently have no control, have no ability to direct policy, have no ability to say what they can and cannot do.
It all started legally, if covertly, back in 1974. That's when the National Security Agency, a super-secret U.S. intelligence unit, asked ISC to help it complete Project X, a chain of electronic listening posts based at South Africa's Simonstown Naval Station. South Africa was using these posts to follow Soviet submarine traffic off the Cape of Good Hope. To ensure secrecy, ISC and the NSA made sure the shipments could not be traced back to them. They created a company called Gamma Systems Associates. In fact, this company was nothing more than a post office box at John F. Kennedy Airport. Gamma was a cutout.
In other words, it's a straw man company, which is technically not part of the government, but it's agreeable to the wishes of the government.
But this sanctioned covert operation stopped in 1977, when President Carter, a strong opponent of South Africa's apartheid regime, told U.S. firms to stop any military-related business with Pretoria. But ISC continued shipping electronics, some civilian, some military, to South Africa. Then in the early 1980s, South Africa began to intensify its efforts at ballistic missile development. For ISC, that was a golden opportunity, because one of its top executives was a man named Clyde Ivey, an American electronics expert who has been called the father of South Africa's missile program. Ivy had extraordinary contacts in that nation's defense structure. Beginning in 1984, federal investigators say, senior ISC executives, including Clyde Ivey, began regular contacts with CIA officials. And these investigators add, the CIA officials had already been following what ISC was sending to South Africa. Over the next 4 years, the agency learned the whole picture. Reporter Tom Flannery is part of the ABC Financial Times investigation.
Well, they knew that ISC was utilizing a former National Security Agency cutout company, Gamma Systems Associates, to ship large volumes of very expensive, highly sophisticated military equipment illegally to South Africa from 1984 through 1989.
And did the CIA tell anybody at all about it?
They told not a soul, neither law enforcement nor legislative.
And what specifically did the CIA know that ISC was sending to South Africa? Some of the most sophisticated electronic gear imaginable. Telemetry tracking equipment used to receive signals from missiles. Gyroscopes used to guide the missiles. And photo imaging equipment called film readers used to monitor a missile's performance.
This equipment is exactly what a country would need to develop, test, and perfect long-range nuclear-capable ballistic missiles, which is what South Africa was doing in the mid-1980s. I think it's inconceivable that the equipment would be used for any other purpose.
This was not small-scale business. The telemetry tracking equipment alone added up to nearly 20 tons, enough to fill a healthy chunk of a 747 cargo plane. Not everything ISC shipped was so enormous, but ISC was shipping equipment to South Africa almost every week for 4 years, much of it through the Gamma Systems Associate cutout. Moreover, this flatly illegal business went on, leaving an elaborate paper trail, utterly unimpeded by U.S. law enforcement, right up until the end of 1988.
I would be shocked, and I would feel that I had been lied to if any sort of operation were going in which the agency or any other intelligence organization was trying to abuse customs by going around it or going through it.
Indeed, the laws on the books, passed by the Congress, couldn't have been clearer in banning the sale of American military technology to South Africa. But there's another, more disturbing twist to this tale of illegal arms shipments. Once the American-made hardware went to South Africa, it didn't stop there. South Africa, after all, has a major arms industry. And, as former Ambassador Herman Nichols says, it was an industry in the mid-1980s very hungry for customers.
I think the South Africans at that stage were quite keen to sell almost anywhere.
Including Iraq. For instance, ISC sold South Africa fuses for cluster bombs, one of the most effective killing machines around. South Africa took that technology and in turn sold hundreds of thousands of bomb fuses to Iraq, a deal brokered by Chilean arms merchant Carlos Cardoon, one of the biggest suppliers of weapons to a grateful Saddam Hussein. In other instances, American technology went directly from South Africa to Iraq. What kind of technology? Well, look again at this incredible footage from the bombing of Baghdad on January 16th. That, says one American law enforcement official, that was some of the stuff that got through to Iraq through the ISC shipments to South Africa. In this case, electronic components of a South African radar system guiding Iraq's anti-aircraft guns. Finally, federal investigators say even American missile technology made its way from Lancaster, Pennsylvania to South Africa to Iraq. Had the Gulf War not intervened, Saddam Hussein would have been well on the way to developing an operational Condor II missile, giving him, with the critical help of American-born technology, the power to deliver chemical or even nuclear weapons anywhere in the Middle East. I'm Jeff Greenfield for Nightline.
We contacted the CIA this morning, gave them the broad outlines of the story you've just heard and seen, and requested a reaction. At 7:15 this evening, the agency faxed to us the following statement. The Central Intelligence Agency declines to comment on these allegations concerning the activities of the International Signal and Control Corporation. However, it is the CIA's policy to cooperate fully with the Department of Justice on matters relating to possible violations of U.S. laws. We suggest that Nightline contact the Department of Justice regarding these allegations. That statement, as you may have noticed, is silent on the allegations of CIA misconduct, but, as suggested, we contacted Justice. It was by then, of course, after business hours, but a Justice Department spokesman returned our call. His statement was even simpler than the CIA's. It is not something we would comment on, one way or the other. When we come back, we'll discuss the implications of this story. Our Washington Bureau, our Senator Arlen Specter of Pennsylvania, who served on the Senate Intelligence Committee during the years when the weapons transfer took place. Jeffrey Kemp, a member of the Reagan administration's National Security Council and author of a forthcoming book on the global arms race. Stephen Bryan, former Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, whose job was to stop the transfer of weapons technology. And one of the principal reporters in this investigation, Lionel Barber of the Financial Times of London. Senator Specter, as I just noted, you were a member of the Intelligence Committee during this period. Should such an operation, had it been sanctioned, have come to the attention of your committee or some other congressional committee?
If, in fact, there was such an operation, and I'm answering a hypothetical question because we only have the allegation, it would be the responsibility of the CIA to tell the Intelligence Committee under applicable law. They'd have to give a timely notification.
Would you be free to tell us if indeed such notification was made?
No, I would not be free to tell you one way or the other because all of that would be secret, but I can give you this generalization that in the period from December of 1986, after Iran-Contra broke, there was a very intense effort made by CIA to be extremely careful on notification of covert activities.
You and I spoke the other day, and we were discussing in general terms the inclination of the Bush administration now to be responsive to this kind of thing. In other words, to make sure that Congress is known. And if memory serves me correctly, you were suggesting that the administration really is disinclined to do that.
Well, I believe that the President is inclined to make known covert operations. There has been a refusal on the part of counsel to the President, and I'll be specific. Boyd and Gray, the lawyer who's counsel to the President, who very strenuously resisted an effort to have a statutory notification put into law. The officials around the President and the National Security Council, according to my understanding, and I've had it from very authoritative sources, were willing to have a statutory 48-hour notice, but Mr. Gray, Boyd and Gray, the counsel to the President, was adamant in refusal on the ground that it would impinge on the President's constitutional authority.
Mr. Bryan, I know you're somewhat skeptical just of the general notion that this kind of weapons technology would flow from the United States to South Africa. Is that correct?
Well, I'm more skeptical about it flowing to Iraq. I worked on the Condor case. In fact, I tried to block it, and I think we mortally wounded that project, and I never heard of any technology coming out of South Africa. Primary source was West Germany and Italy, and to a lesser extent Argentina.
But what about the notion of this kind of technology flowing from the United States to South Africa?
Well, we tried very hard during this period to interdict any technology that we knew of going to South Africa or to any other country that was blocked from receiving military technology from the United States. And this is a story that I never heard before.
Does it surprise you that weapons technology would flow, perhaps even without the knowledge of senior officials at the Defense Department?
Nothing ever surprises me nowadays, but it's certainly not a story that we knew of at the time that I served in the Reagan administration.
Dr. Kemp, give us your sense of what justification, because indeed the whole notion, A, of weapons technology flowing from the United States to South Africa, and then B, as Mr. Bryan suggests, that technology flowing from South Africa to Iraq, on the face of it, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The South Africans and the Israelis, for example, are very close. The Israelis and the Iraqis are and have been for a long time bitter enemies. How could one justify something like that, even from a purely logical point of view?
Well, I have no idea what the real story is, but certainly in the 70s, remember, we were concerned about the Cape route, the flow of oil around the Cape route, and Soviet warships. So that could be a reason for having some understanding with the South Africans. I think that was the reason. In the 1980s, It might have had something to do with us wanting to know what the South Africans knew about Israeli nuclear weapons and what the cooperation was, if any, between South Africa and Israel. That's purely hypothetical on my case, but in the past, technology has been used as a hard currency to get things or to persuade governments to do things that they might not otherwise want to do. This may be a case where that was going on.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I'd like to go to my colleague Lionel Barber and nail down a few loose ends here. We'll continue our conversation in a moment. Continuing now with Lionel Barber of the Financial Times. Lionel, some of our guests here are skeptical, which is understandable, because so were you and I when we first began getting wind of this story. Speak for a moment, if you would, about the documentary evidence that relates specifically to the transfer of the technology from the United States to South Africa.
Well, we have got bills of lading referring to the technology which left JFK Airport, and it specifically notes that the items concerned, missile technology and other advanced weapons, required export licenses. We know that they did not have export licenses and therefore were in violation of U.S. law.
Is there any reason to believe that there could have been, and I'd like you to explain, if you would, what a presidential finding is, that there might have been a presidential finding which could have perhaps set aside even U.S. law and permitted this kind of an operation to go forward?
Well, a presidential finding which sees a covert operation as in the national interest of the United States would have to be passed on, or the information would have to go to relevant senior congressional members. And we have contacted several of those who would have been in a position to know, who ought to have been told, and they say they know nothing about this at all. But I think there's a very important point here, Ted. The fact is that informed officials in and outside the government have told us that actually the CIA knew about these shipments, but it was not a sanctioned covert operation. And in that respect, they wouldn't have had to inform Congress. But there's only one problem here, and that is that if CIA officials were aware of violations of the law, they needed to pass on the information to the Justice Department, and they did not.
Mr. Bryant, you were shaking your head a moment ago. Why?
Well, because it's not the CIA's job to enforce the law. Their job is to provide the information to the government officials who have that responsibility. And typically, they know about thousands and thousands of these kinds of things that go on, and they report them diligently. And the government officials try to sort through them, try to pick out the ones they think are the most serious, to go after them and to deal with them.
Well, if I could just come back here, I think the fact is that we know that there were breaches of the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act in 1986, Export Administration Act, the U.S. arms embargo. I mean, there was plenty of evidence to suggest that there were violations of the law, and that the CIA had a responsibility to pass on that information to the Department of Justice.
Ted, may I raise a question?
Please.
A key point which has been made here is whether the matter was sanctioned by the CIA. Now, that's really the critical factor. The obligation of the CIA to report to the Intelligence Committee and the obligation of the CIA to report violations of law arises when the officials, responsible officials of the CIA, know about it. When Lionel uses the word sanction, the question arises in my mind as to whether it was a rogue operation not known to the top officials of the CIA. When Lionel has documented certain bills of lading as to the transactions to South Africa, I would be interested, if he cares to document the evidence that shows knowledge on the part of CIA top officials to show that it was in fact sanctioned.
Lionel?
Well, we have been working on this story for a number of weeks. We have contacted dozens of people. We have interviewed people over and over again. And we have several sources who say that there were regular briefings between ISC executives and CIA officers on what was going out from Lancaster, Pennsylvania to South Africa. Whether that information was passed up the ladder, higher up to senior CIA officials, I do not know.
Let me raise a somewhat broader question and pose it again to Senator Spector. I thought, and you used a term which had a great resonance in the mid-'70s, a rogue operation. I thought that kind of thing was supposed to have been brought under control.
Well, it is supposed to have been brought under control, but I picked up Lionel's term on sanction, and he injected the concept that the operation may not have been sanctioned. If there's any evidence that anybody from the CIA was involved, I can tell you flatly that the Senate Intelligence Committee, which I had served on, and the House Intelligence Committee for that matter, would be very interested to pursue the matter. And it may well be, and I would expect that the top CIA officials would be too. If there is evidence, it ought to be pursued in official channels as well as the investigation, which of course the Financial Times has every right, as does Nightline, to pursue.
Let me just warn our affiliates that we're going to be going a few minutes over our allotted time tonight so that we can complete at least this phase of the story. And let me just put to Dr. Kemp for a moment. What we are discussing here, Dr. Kemp, is, after all, not just an occasional shipment, but almost weekly shipments that went on for 4 years, including some very sophisticated militarily important equipment that went aboard South African Airways from JFK to Pretoria, as I say, week after week after week, over a period of 4 to 5 years.
Yes, extraordinary, and I think the story should come out. But I would just say, in the historical context, the period we're talking about, 84 to 88, don't forget the focus of all our operations, CIA, Justice Department, everybody, was Operation Stealth, to stop the flow of arms to Iran. And it could well be that people knew this was going on and really didn't follow up on it, that some people in the CIA had an idea something was up, but there were other priorities, because, you know, there is so many of these activities being tracked down all the time that to follow everyone diligently the way we look as though we should have done now is perhaps to hope for too much.
Well, we are talking about more than just an occasional word getting to the CIA. We are talking about regular quarterly briefings, again, that took place over a period of 4 to 5 years. But we're going to have to take a break, and we'll continue in a moment. Stephen Bryan, let's bring our discussion around to today's events and the general spread of weapons technology. There's a move afoot now to lower some of the barriers in trading with communist countries. So if you would, perhaps you could bring us around to a concluding point having to do just with the general spread of technology and how when we transfer weapons to one country, we have very little control of what happens to those weapons then.
Well, right at the moment, in fact, tomorrow, we will be releasing with our allies an incredible array of technology that can be used to make weapons. It will be released to the communist countries like the Soviet Union and China. And as you are well aware, the Soviets supplied Iraq with the bulk of their weapons, and the Chinese have been selling missiles and other sensitive equipment in the Middle East. So where we're going is utterly in the wrong direction, it seems to me, in terms of developing a coherent control regime over weapons, and particularly over weapons technology that threatens, I think, world peace.
And Dr. Kemp, a closing comment from you on the same subject, if you would.
We can't control everything. We've got to decide what are the most dangerous and most important items. Nuclear weapons, surface-to-surface missiles. Let's focus our efforts on those. I think we can get cooperation with the Russians and possibly the Chinese and certainly the Europeans. We try to cover everything. We're not going to get anywhere. We're going to antagonize a lot of people, and we'll end up much worse than we are today.
Senator Spector, 30 seconds.
I think we ought to do our best to cover everything. I wouldn't accept that assertion at all, that we can't cover everything. If it can be used for weapon proliferation, it ought to be stopped. And it's an absolute outrage what has happened in the past and what continues to happen. We ought to try to stop everything related to the proliferation of weapons.
Gentlemen, I thank you all very much. Dr. Kemp, Mr. Bryan, Mr. Spector, Lionel Barber. As I indicated at the top of this broadcast, this is part of a continuing puzzle that we are trying to piece together. We'll have further reports in the future. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
On July 3rd and 4th, 1987, in Kansas City, you met with Iranian Defense Minister Mr. Ben Banashi. Do you know anything about such a meeting?
No, sir.
And finally, according to Mr. Ben Banashi, on April 20th, 1989, you met with him in a private home turn to some of the allegations made by Richard Bobbion, the self-professed arms dealer now awaiting trial for security charges in the Florida jail. Have you ever met Richard Bobbion?
Not that I'm aware of, sir.
Bobbion claims that he first met with you and a Mr. M.K. Moss in Geneva in June of 1984. Is this true?
No, sir.
Bobbion claimed that you, working with M.K. Moss, ran a covert CIA operation to supply arms to Iraq. Dr. Gates, have you ever been aware of any CIA or U.S. government covert operation to supply arms to Iraq?
No, sir.
Bobbion claims that you were a very good friend of Carlos Caterbone and that one of your pet projects was to transfer cluster bomb technology to Carlos Caterbone. Dr. Gates, were you ever involved in an operation to transfer cluster bomb technology to Carlos Caterbone?
No, sir.
Now, Dr. Gates, I will ask you a few questions about the weapons that were allegedly transferred to Iraq by South Africa by a company in Lancaster, Pennsylvania called International Signal Control, or ISC. Before the CIA was informed by the FBI in December 1986 that ISC was under criminal investigation, were you aware of possible illegal activities on the part of ISC?
No, sir.
A story in the Financial Times alleged that you may have gone to visit ISC in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Have you ever met with officials of ISC?
Not that I'm aware of.
Have you ever been to Lancaster, Pennsylvania?
No, sir.
I wonder if you could give us a short synopsis, and that will conclude my questions, Mr. Chairman, of
during the 70s and 80s, today was indicted, along with other executives who worked at International Signal and Control. News 8 has been following this story for years. Tonight, Susan Shapiro begins our coverage from the federal courthouse in Philadelphia.
155 millimeters.
At a packed news conference, U.S. Attorney Michael Balson detailed major indictments against James Garin and other top executives of International Signal and Control. The Lancaster defense contractor is accused of masterminding a scheme that involved illegal arms sales and a $1 billion fraud.
The purpose of the financial fraud was to make phony contracts look authentic and to build up the value of ISC into something that it was not.
The enormous and complex scheme, which was described as looping, was apparently enough to defraud British defense contractor Ferranti International, which merged with ISC in 1987.
Ferranti itself initially couldn't believe that they had been defrauded until our agents explained the depth of the problem to them.
Ferranti told News 8, "We have been cooperating with the U.S. government and are glad to see those efforts come to fruition." Garin is charged with 8 counts, including financial fraud, mail fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, and violation of arms control laws. Officials of 6 federal agencies who were here showed off some of the weapons they say ISC shipped illegally to South Africa, and in turn ended up in Iraq during the Persian Gulf War. After the war with Iraq, proximity fuses like this were found in southern Iraq. Inside were power supplies that could be traced to ISC in Lancaster.
And from a DoD standpoint, the flagrancy of this case is that ISC and its officials put greed and the ability to make a buck ahead of our fighting men.
Garin's attorney, Joseph Tate, issued a statement saying that technology is known around the world and anyone can obtain it. In addition, officials here would not comment on allegations that the CIA had full knowledge of the arms shipments.
Many government agencies, including the CIA, cooperated in this investigation, and I think I should just leave it as that.
Garin, who's made a plea agreement with the federal government, was not arrested, but other top company executives who worked closely with him were taken into custody in Lancaster and arraigned in Philadelphia. Terrence Foles was picked up at his home in Holtwood. Thomas Jasmine was picked up at his home on Butter Road. Robert Clyde Ivey, who's also known as Ringley, was arrested at his residence on Cochrane Drive. And Wayne Radcliffe here at his home on Grand Oak Place. His relatives didn't want to talk. This news conference attracted media from all over, including London.
Ferranti is a major British company, and the billion-dollar fraud here is suspected the city of London.
affected a lot of people. So what began as a very small defense firm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, has now turned into an international scandal. Just take a look at these indictments, almost an inch thick. They also include indictments against South African companies and South African citizens.
No doubt these are very serious charges.
Very, very serious. Just let me give you an example. For the Arms Export Control Act, in other words, violating our laws that prevent that kind of shipping of arms to South Africa, a $1 million fine, and that includes 10 years imprisonment on each of the counts.
One example.
One example. So you can imagine they will add up if they are indeed convicted.
Jim was a Guerin protege and former president of the now defunct Lancaster-based defense contractor United Chemcon Corporation. He was found in 1989 of defrauding the government of millions of dollars in connection with Navy contracts. Christian was released from federal prison earlier this year after serving 2 years of a reduced sentence. In an exclusive interview today, Christian spoke to News 8 about James Guerin.
People found it extremely hard to accept that Jim would assist in something like this. Was he going on smaller scales? I thought that Jim had some approval for the CIA to do some of the things that he was doing. The CIA, I felt, gave Jim the latitude to do some things. Jim took that latitude and expounded upon it to the point where he didn't have to show auditors contracts because, as he can say, this is top secret. Jim would build his company at any lengths. He said to me over and over again, Jim, I'll do anything.
Signal and Control today spoke out about their indictments in a $1 billion fraud and for illegal arms sales.
Susan Shapiro has that reaction. Joins us now, Susan.
Wayne and Kim, Jim Guerin spoke to News 8 today from his home in Naples, Florida. He refused to let us interview him on camera or to tape our telephone conversation. He only wanted to talk about arms sales to South Africa. Those weapons ended up in Iraq and were used against U.S. troops in the Gulf War. The allegations and indictments were revealed at a news conference yesterday after a massive FBI investigation into the Lancaster-based company's operations. Guerin was president of ISC when the company sold weapons and technology to South Africa. Federal officials say proximity fuses like this one that could be traced to ISC ended up in Iraq. They were found by our troops after the Persian Gulf War. Today, Guerin told News 8, and these are his words, "I am super upset that South Africa shipped anything to Iraq. None of us knew that. I personally didn't know it until yesterday." Guerin did admit he was wrong to sell arms to South Africa during an embargo imposed by President Carter. Now, another ISC executive told us he had no idea the sales to South Africa were illegal. Terrence Falls was among 16 others who were also indicted yesterday. Terrence Falls, who worked as an ISC purchasing agent for 17 years, spoke with me in his home in Holtwood. He told me he is shocked at being indicted and did nothing wrong.
I was under the impression all along that it was sanctioned, and I really can't make any further comments other than the fact that I was told repeatedly through the years that it was a Washington-sanctioned operation.
When you heard Washington sanctioned, you assumed that meant CIA?
Absolutely. Absolutely. To me, if somebody refers to a Washington operation, it's a CIA connection.
In addition to the criminal charges, the U.S. attorney filed a forfeiture complaint against Falls and the others. Federal marshals closed Falls' Frogtown Inn and seized the property, along with his car.
I haven't gone to trial, I haven't been convicted of anything, and for them to just arbitrarily come in and take Frogtown, which is my only source of income, and my automobile, I just think is highly irregular.
Falls says it all happened yesterday morning about 6 a.m. Federal marshals entered his home armed. Told him all about the indictments.
And he had no idea they were coming.
He did get a little bit of a clue earlier in the week, but was surprised at the forfeiture.
Trump administration put every journalistic institution in this country on Julian Assange's side of the ledger. We've never in this country successfully charged somebody for publishing secret material. There is a reason, it's called the First Amendment, that the U.S. government has never successfully made that a crime before. Investigative journalists and all sorts of different entities publish secret stuff all the time. That is the bread and butter of what we do.
Journalists across the nation are sounding the alarm bells about this case. This is the new indictment against WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange.
Obama had a choice to bring the case or not. Because of First Amendment considerations, he would not bring the case. So this case is a reflection of Donald Trump.
There hasn't actually been such a significant attack on the freedom of the press since my case in 1971, but my warning really was that it wasn't going to stop there. Almost inevitably, there would be a stronger attack directly on the foundations of journalism against editors, publishers, and journalists themselves.
The reason why the Espionage Act charges are such a threat to the New Yorker, to the Washington Post, to the New York Times, is that they allow the government to make it a crime to publish truthful information that was lawfully acquired.
Well, I'm telling you tonight, that precedent might later be used against other publishers, because that's how precedents work.
This is, to put it bluntly, wrong, unconstitutional, and downright tyrannical. If Assange's publishing of classified information runs afoul of the law, so does the work of just about every single serious press outlet, this one included.
Julian Assange has met the responsibilities of a journalist and one who has lived up to the highest ideals of the profession and is being savagely persecuted for doing so.
The state of our democracy. It goes without saying that essential to that is a free press. That is part of how this place, this country, this grand experiment in self-government has to work.
Anyone, anywhere in the world, publishing any information that the government doesn't want to be published can be prosecuted, and I call it persecuted because it is for political reasons, and silenced through criminal law as a spy by one of those involved countries. And that is extremely dangerous because we are in such a complex society today that we cannot oversee and control what our governments are doing with our tax money and the power that we give to them, unless we have a free press that can report to us when the governing powerful people abuse of their power and commit crimes. If it becomes a crime to tell the truth about this, then we are really living in a tyranny because we have lost the ability to exercise our democratic rights to control our government. So and please, you can check my personal history. I'm not known for, alarmist headlines. This is the first time in a 20-year career that I really step out and I'm really being loud about it because it's urgent, it's alarming, and it's fundamentally dangerous.
Last night, the list of pardons was published, and Julian's name was not on it. And so I am issuing a last-minute plea to the President to do the right thing. He can still do it. Mr. President, you can still pardon Julian if you want to. The First Amendment is on the verge of extinction, and pardoning Julian can save it. People from across politics are clamoring for this to happen. It is the most popular move that you can possibly make as you leave your presidency. The previous administration pardoned the whistleblower. How can it be that the publisher is not pardoned when the whistleblower is? How can it be that the publisher is punished for longer than the whistleblower? Mr. President, Julian is in prison right now. He could die there. This may be his only chance. Do the right thing.
And in both cases tonight, as one of his final acts as president, Donald Trump has the opportunity to make that right. to pardon both of them. We told you that last night. We told you it before. We're hearing tonight that neither man, particularly Julian Assange, we don't know if this is true, is likely to get a pardon. Why? Well, apparently because Republicans in the Senate, and by Republicans in the Senate we mean Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the leader of Republicans in the Senate, has sent word over to the White House, if you pardon Julian Assange, we are much more likely to convict you in an impeachment trial. Now, is it legal to hold that over a president's head? We're not lawyers, we don't know. It's certainly wrong. But more than that, it tells you everything about their priorities. At a time when this country in some ways is coming apart, we're at a pivot point in American history. And if you're watching this show, you probably feel pretty threatened, and for good reason. There are people on the other channels saying they're going to hunt you down like a terrorist. At that moment, what is Mitch McConnell, your designated defender in the United States Senate, worrying about? He's worrying about protecting the uniparty in Washington, not his party and the Democratic Party in permanent Washington. They're the reason both these men have been locked up, because both these men embarrassed permanent Washington. That's their crime. And his priority in the final hours of the Trump administration is to make certain that they remain punished for doing that. It tells you everything. We don't know what's going to happen in the end. We've got a number of hours left for the president to make that decision. But we want you to know how that decision is being made, because it's deeply revealing.
Thank you for coming. I had hoped that today would be the day that Julian would come home. Today is not that day, but that day will come soon.
Yes.
As long as Julian has to endure suffering in isolation as an unconvicted prisoner in Belmarsh prison, and as long as our children continue to be bereft of their father's love and affection, we cannot celebrate. We will celebrate the day he comes home. Today is a victory for Julian. Today's victory is the first step towards justice in this case. We are pleased that the court has recognized the seriousness and inhumanity of what he has endured and what he faces. But let's not forget, the indictment in the US has not been dropped. We are extremely concerned that the US government has decided to appeal this decision. It continues to want to punish Julian and make him disappear into the deepest, darkest hole of the US prison system for the rest of his life. That can never happen. We will never accept that journalism is a crime in this country or any other. Let's not forget that US agents plotted to kill Julian on British soil. His British solicitors were deliberately targeted by name, and their documents were stolen. Their illegal operations even targeted our 6-month-old baby. It is sickening, and it is also a threat to everyone. On behalf of Julian and myself, I want to thank the millions of people around the world and the institutions that are already calling for this persecution to end. I ask you all to shout louder, lobby harder, until he is free. I call on everyone else to come together to defend Julian's rights. Not just Julian's rights, they're your rights too. Julian's freedom is coupled to all our freedoms, and our freedoms are lost in the blink of an eye. I call on insiders to come forward to expose the full extent of the misconduct that has led to Julian's imprisonment. And I call on the President of the United States to end this now. Mr. President, tear down these prison walls. Let our little boys have their father. Free Julian. Free the press. Free us all. Thank you.
Hey, this is Sarah Palin up in Alaska, and I am the first one to admit when I make a mistake. I admit that I made a mistake some years ago not supporting Julian Assange, thinking that he was a bad guy, that he leaked material that perhaps he shouldn't, and I've learned a lot since then. And I think Julian did the right thing, and Julian did us all a favor in America, did the world a favor by fighting for what he believed was right, and ultimately he's been proven to be right. He deserves a pardon. He deserves all of us to understand more about what he has done in the name of real journalism, and that's getting to the bottom of issues that the public really needs to hear about and benefit from. Some years ago, I publicly spoke out against Julian, and I made a mistake. Like I say, I've learned a lot since then. I know that it's coming down to the wire and whether he's going to be pardoned or not. I want more Americans to speak out on his behalf and to understand what it is that he has done and what has been done to him as he was working on the people's behalf to allow information to get to us so that we could make up our minds about different issues, about different people. He did the right thing. I support him. And I hope that more and more people, especially as it comes down to the wire, will speak up in support of pardoning Julian. God bless him.
I'd like to invite to the stage someone who's taken a particularly heroic stance in defending us against torture. He's serving as the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture. He's also a fellow academic and a professor at the University of Glasgow and holds the Human Rights Chair at the Geneva Academy of International Humanitarian Law and Human Rights in Switzerland, Professor Neil Smeltzer.
Thank you. And thank you for organizing this event. It's good to see fewer and fewer empty seats. And it's good to see more and more representatives of the press being interested. I have said many things about this case. I have come a long way myself in this case, and I've written many things about this case. I'd like to start with a metaphor that I have used yesterday and at other events, and that describe to me and help us understand what's really going on here. This room is big enough to house a couple of elephants, but let's just say we have one elephant in the room. You switch off the lights, it's pitch dark. The elephant is over there in the corner. And now I take a flashlight and I point over in that dark room. I take a flashlight and I point in the other corner. Where will all of you be looking? The other corner, right? Now Julian Assange has taken the flashlight in that dark room and he pointed at the elephant. The elephant of war crimes, the elephant of misconduct under the color of law, the elephant of serious violations of human rights and impunity. He's pointed his spotlight at this elephant, and the elephant, as a deer in the headlights, was frozen for a couple of moments, a couple of weeks. Everybody was discussing these revelations. But then the elephant snatched the spotlight and they turned it over and pointed it at Julian Assange. The room became dark, and the only thing we could see in the room is Julian Assange in the corner and the spotlight pointing at him. And now everybody was discussing Julian Assange's character, Julian Assange's private habits. Was he wearing shorts or long pants during his video conferences? Was he skateboarding in the embassy? Did he feed his cat? Did he smear things on the walls of the embassy? I mean, absolutely trivial things compared to the revelations that he made. Who is the one that has the spotlight? It's certainly the governments and the media. The media are the link. The media are the ones that observe the governments for us and then are supposed to inform us, to empower us, not just to entertain us. But if the media wants to talk about skateboards, we just want to read about skateboards. We're not looking at the elephant in the dark. And I think this is what this is about. This is why everybody's discussing, is Julian Assange a good man or a bad man? Or what has he done? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Or could someone have been endangered potentially? No one has ever heard of anyone being harmed by the revelations, but theoretically it could be harmful, so we have to extradite him to face justice. But no one discusses the people that were murdered on film. They were not endangered, they were murdered. And you can hear and you can hear the soldiers commenting. Now, I've been a legal advisor for the International Committee of the Red Cross. I've worked in war areas, and I know that civilians can arm themselves, can become dangerous, and become legitimate targets. Even if some of these people were carrying weapons, once they are wounded, they are protected. Wounded combatants cannot be targeted. Targeting wounded combatants, even if they are combatants, regardless whether they're civilians or not, once they're wounded, targeting them becomes a war crime. We can hear the soundtrack on that video. Oh, he's wounded. Fire. Yes, and then here comes the minibus. The driver wants to rescue these people, and then they're asking for permission to engage, knowing very well that they're shooting at rescuers. It's a war crime. It's not a potential war crime. It is a war crime. And who has ever asked for the prosecution of that war crime? We have the Senate committee report, 7,000 pages of evidence of systematic torture in the name of the US government. It's not true that no one has been prosecuted. There is one CIA agent that has been prosecuted for it. His name is John Kiriakou. He is the whistleblower who actually disclosed it. No one else has been prosecuted for the most serious crime of torture. So then we have, and there's evidence, I mean, that's a report by the Congress, by the Senate. That's not an NGO report, and I'm not belittling NGOs, but I'm saying this, a branch of the government recognizing that the government had a systematic policy of torture. And there is an absolute unconditional legal obligation in the Convention Against Torture that was ratified by the US to prosecute every act of torture. It has not been done. But we're prosecuting the person that has leaked the information, Chelsea Manning, and we're prosecuting the journalist who has published the information. And then the UK is doing the same. The UK was an ally, obviously, of the US in this, and the UK Parliament investigated and made a report last year, confirming that the UK involvement in a CIA torture program was much more substantial than we suspected, and asked for a judicial inquiry. Now, taking a good example of the American government, the UK government this summer cancelled out this inquiry. We're not going to prosecute. But then, in correspondence with me, the UK government claims that it doesn't condone torture. It is proud to cooperate with the UN Special Rapporteur. But when I make a report to the UK about its involvement in torture and I ask them to investigate their own involvement, I don't receive a response for 5 months. And then I receive a one-pager saying, we reject any allegations of torture and Julian Assange is being treated in accordance with English law. When precisely the opposite was the result of my investigation. But it's not common law. So, by putting a spotlight on Julian Assange, these states have deliberately created a monster, a purported rapist, narcissist, hacker, and spy. And this poisoned narrative has really intoxicated the whole public. I was intoxicated by it. I didn't even know about it. I didn't know Julian Assange. I didn't know about his case. But when his legal team approached me a bit more than a year ago in December 2018, I declined to get involved because I had this visceral reaction of, I'm not going to defend this rapist and narcissist. And I'm the special rapporteur on torture. I mean, would you think I'd be a bit more discerning? But I had this visceral reaction myself. So I'm not blaming anyone for having this initial reaction. It's natural because we absorb through the media these types of attitudes. But then when, luckily and thankfully, his legal team approached me again and sent me a couple of pieces of evidence, I started to get intrigued because I realized immediately when you scratch the surface, things don't add up. This whole narrative is not supported. It collapses. And the more you start to dig, the more dirt comes to the surface. And so I was intrigued, and I went to visit him with 2 medical doctors to have an objective basis, a psychiatrist, a forensic expert. We visited him for 4 hours. We had separate medical examinations and bilateral discussions with me, and all the 3 of us came to the conclusion that he showed clear patterns of psychological torture. I reported to the UK government thinking, well, this is the UK now. I mean, that's the rule of law. I'm just going to, they're going to investigate and we're going to sort this out and I can go home. Well, home I went, but I waited for 5 months to get this response that I told you about. And that response was just, we reject any allegations of torture. And then, obviously, Julian Assange's state of health deteriorated to the point where I was genuinely afraid he might die in prison. And let me make it very straight. Psychological torture is not torture light. Yeah? Psychological torture aims directly at destroying the personality of an individual by isolating them from all positive influences, by manipulating their feelings, exposing them to constant anxiety and stress, overstimulating their nervous system to a point where the forensic expert explained to me the nervous system simply collapses at some point and takes permanent damage. Some traces of which we could already confirm in those physical examinations. I was just profoundly shocked. I could not imagine a year ago that I would ever get into a situation where a state like Sweden or a state like the UK would refuse to engage with me as the United Nations Special Rapporteur that's mandated by states to investigate cases and to ask questions to them, that they would refuse to engage with me. And then they accuse me of having lost my impartiality because I speak at events like this. Well, they're not inviting me to their offices. And I'd like to inform the public about what the government is doing. And I take pride in the objectivity of my investigation. I was reluctant to visit Julian Assange. If I was partial against him. I didn't expect to find anything, but I wanted 2 medical experts to confirm it to me. Well, they confirmed something else. And I immediately recognized the patterns myself because I've been visiting prisons for many years. I visited political prisoners in the Middle East, in the Balkans, and they all showed this type of pattern after a couple of months. So I was objective, I was neutral, I was impartial. But once I have investigated and I have identified someone as being a torture victim, I'm not neutral between the torture victim and the torturer. So, the other aspect that governments criticize me, they say, well, you know, Mr. Meltzer, this is not really in your core mandate. This is not real torture. You know, this has nothing to do with your mandate. Well, let me just tell you, there are three aspects that are absolutely at the core of my mandate. This man has exposed torture, and this torture has not been prosecuted. That's a violation of the Convention Against Torture, and that's in my mandate. Secondly, this man has been tortured and continues to be tortured. Psychological torture. If anyone wants to know exactly what I mean by this, read my upcoming report. In 2 weeks it will be published to the Human Rights Council on psychological torture. Thirdly, if this man gets extradited to the United States, he will be tortured until the day he dies. Because the prison conditions in the supermax institutions amount to torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment, not just by my standards, but all my predecessors, and even Amnesty International, that otherwise is not very supportive in this case, recognizes that those conditions of detention amount to torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. There is no way he can be lawfully extradited to the United States. Not because of what he has done, not because of what he will be facing there. So I think it is absolutely time for all of us to switch on our own spotlights and point it at the elephant in the room, to refuse to discuss the personality of a man who has done more than his share in serving our society, and identify what really is the issue here. We cannot have states that allow unchecked power. Human beings cannot manage unchecked power. That's why we created the separation of power. That's why we created checks and balances. Now, these checks and balances, these branches of government tend to collude with each other if we don't supervise them. And that's why we have the free press that's tasked to do that. But the press that doesn't do that isn't free. It's not a press at all. It is just a public relations department of those governments. And that's why the emergence of WikiLeaks is just a natural consequence of the media failing to do their job, because someone needs to inform and empower the public. And now it is up to us, because it is about Julian Assange, but it is much more also about all of you and your children and your families. And 20 years from now, will you still be able to know the truth about what your government is doing? Or when it has become a crime to inform you about what your government is doing with your tax money to other people that have not done anything wrong in their lives? So it is up to us. We have to take our spotlights in our hands and point it at the elephant. Thank you very much.
This is Stan J. Caterbone at 1250 Fremont Street, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, 17603. It's